Hello everyone, and welcome to the Wonder Words. I know many of you use this video to help you fall asleep, so before that, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, get cozy, take a deep breath, and let yourself relax. The Harbor Lightkeeper. Elias stood at the top of the weathered spiral staircase, the wooden steps creaking beneath his boots. Outside, the harbor stretched wide under a sky heavy with storm clouds, dark and low like a thick blanket. The salty breeze rattled the narrow windows of the lighthouse, carrying with it the sharp cries of gulls and the faint toll of distant bell buoys. This was his home, a century-old sentinel watching over the restless sea. The lighthouse wasn't like others. It didn't cast a sharp beam of light to cut through the darkness. Instead, its great brass lens shimmered with soft amber waves, flowing and folding like calm ocean currents. Sailors whispered about it in hushed tones, saying the light reached into their minds, soothing fear and anxiety as they fought the wild storms. Elias took a slow breath and rubbed the brass railing polished smooth by decades of his hands. The foghorn rumbled deep and low in the distance, a steady heartbeat echoing through the mist. He knew every sound, every creak, every flicker of the old machinery that kept the lantern turning night after night. But the world was changing. Satellites and GPS had rendered most lighthouses obsolete. The government talked about automation and closing the station. People said Elias was a relic, a man holding on to a ghost. The local fishermen still relied on the light's calm glow, but they were fewer each year. The old harbor's charm was fading, replaced by sleek yachts and corporate fleets. Tonight, Elias felt the weight of that change heavier than ever. Far out on the harbor, a sleek white yacht drifted dangerously close to the rocky shoreline. Its owner, Victor Lang, a CEO in his late 40s, sat in the polished cabin staring at blinking screens, frustration etched deep across his face. The latest navigation system had failed in the sudden fog, and the yacht's engines were sluggish. His confident world of control was slipping into chaos. The amber waves from the lighthouse lens brushed over the water like a gentle hand. The yacht's electronic chaos dimmed in its presence, and Victor's sharp mind felt the first flicker of calm in hours. As the boat gently nudged closer to the light, Victor whispered, "What is this?" From the tower window, Elias watched the yacht's course steady, the panic in its wake melting away like mist in the morning sun. The brass bell buoy rang its slow, steady chime, and Elias began to wind the old clockwork mechanism that turned the great lens. His fingers moved with practiced ease, polished brass gleaming softly in the lantern's glow. This ritual, simple and ancient, was his connection to the sea, the storms, and the lives that depended on this calm. He glanced down at the harbor and saw the yacht's silhouette, no longer a threat, but a visitor seeking refuge. "Welcome to the harbor light," Elias murmured, voice rough with years of salt and wind. Victor paced the yacht's polished deck, the hum of the engines now replaced by the gentle slap of waves against the hull. The fog hung thick, swallowing the distant outlines of other boats and the shore itself. His usual grip on control was gone, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. He leaned over the railing and looked up toward the lighthouse, its amber glow pulsing like a heartbeat in the fog. The light wasn't harsh or glaring like the electronic beams he was used to. It was soft, almost warm, and it seemed to reach deep into his chest, easing the tight coil of tension there. "Why am I feeling this?" Victor muttered, shaking his head. He wasn't a man who believed in magic or old stories. Yet here, in the middle of this fog, something felt different. Inside the lighthouse, Elias moved with steady hands. He had spent years tending to this place, caring for the ancient mechanisms and keeping the light alive. His beard was flecked with gray, and his eyes held the quiet strength of someone who had faced many storms, both on the sea and in life. He could see the yacht's lights flickering through the mist. His heart tightened with a strange mixture of hope and sadness. Maybe tonight, this old beacon could remind someone that sometimes the greatest guidance wasn't through technology, but through calm. Victor's phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. The usual barrage of calls and messages felt distant and unimportant. For once, he allowed himself to simply stand still, breathing in the salty air and listening to the faint sound of the foghorn in the distance. The brass polishing tools rested on the lighthouse's old wooden table, waiting for Elias's careful touch. The metal gleamed under his hands, each stroke a ritual of care and connection. This was not just a job, it was a promise to the sea and to those who sailed it. Elias thought about the sailors he had helped over the years, the storms they had faced, and the peace the light had brought them. He wasn't just a keeper of a lamp. He was a keeper of calm in a chaotic world. The yacht shifted gently with the waves, now securely moored near the dock. Victor stepped onto the worn wooden pier, the fog still wrapping around him like a soft cloak. Elias stood waiting by the lighthouse door, his expression calm but curious. When their eyes met, a silent understanding passed between them. "Lost your way?" Elias asked softly. Victor smiled, a little embarrassed. "You could say that. I guess I forgot there's more than one way to find your way home." The foghorn sounded again, steady and deep, as if affirming the truth of those words. Victor followed Elias into the lighthouse, the heavy wooden door creaking shut behind them. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of salt, old wood, and polished brass. The faint hum of the turning lens filled the space, mixing with the distant sounds of the sea. Elias gestured toward a small wooden stool by the lantern room window. "Sit. You look like a man who needs to rest his mind." Victor sank into the chair, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle deep in his bones. He watched as Elias moved gracefully around the room, checking gauges and oiling the intricate gears that kept the lens spinning. "You know," Elias began, his voice low and steady, "this lighthouse has stood here for over 100 years. Through storms that tore at its stone walls and nights so dark you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. And every night, it does the same thing, it shines its light. But not like any other lighthouse." Victor frowned. "I always thought lighthouses were just big flashlights for boats." Elias smiled softly. "This one's different. It doesn't just shine to guide ships. It shines to calm the storm inside their minds." Victor looked up at the amber light filtering through the glass. It flickered gently, waves of soft warmth spilling across the dark harbor. Ever feel like you're sailing through a storm, but it's not the sea that's rough, it's your own head? Elias asked. Victor nodded slowly. "All the time. The pressure, the noise, it's exhausting." Elias reached out and polished a brass lens with a clean cloth, his movements rhythmic and calming. "Sometimes, all it takes is a moment of stillness to find your way." Outside, the foghorn's low bellow rolled through the night, a deep, comforting sound that seemed to pulse with the light's amber waves. Victor closed his eyes and listened. For the first time in days, the tension in his chest loosened. He felt the calm ripple through him, like gentle waves washing over rocky shores. Elias pulled out an old, leather-bound journal from a nearby shelf. This belonged to the first keeper. He wrote about the storms he faced, not just in the harbor, but inside himself. Victor leaned forward, curiosity sparking. "Do you ever get tired of it? The loneliness, the waiting?" Elias considered for a moment. "Yes, but the light always calls me back. It reminds me that even in the darkest nights, there's a purpose to being here." The amber glow from the lens painted soft patterns on the walls, as if the light itself was alive and breathing. Victor's phone buzzed again in his pocket, but he let it ring out. He felt strangely disconnected from the urgency of his usual life. He looked at Elias and said quietly, "Maybe I need to learn how to be still." Elias nodded. "You're already on the right path." The foghorn sounded again, steady and sure, as the amber waves continued to wash over the harbor, and the lighthouse kept its eternal watch. Victor stayed longer than he expected. Night deepened outside, thick fog hugging the coastline and softening the edges of the world. Inside the lighthouse, the amber glow cast gentle shadows on the rough stone walls, wrapping them both in a quiet warmth. Elias fetched 2 cups of tea from a small wooden cabinet. The scent of chamomile mixed with the salty air. He handed 1 cup to Victor, who took it gratefully, savoring the warmth. "Most people think the sea is what keeps me here," Elias said, settling onto a worn chair by the window. "But it's the light and the calm it brings. The harbor isn't just water and rocks. It's a place where people come to find peace, even if they don't know it yet." Victor stared out at the fog-shrouded harbor, the yacht's silhouette barely visible in the distance. He could feel the tension inside him loosening, like a tightly coiled spring slowly unwinding. "Do you ever get scared?" Victor asked suddenly. "That someday no one will need this lighthouse anymore?" Elias paused, then nodded. "Sometimes. Technology changes everything. But the heart doesn't always listen to machines. There will always be storms that can't be tracked on a screen. There will always be moments when a person needs something more, something deeper." Victor took a slow sip of tea, the warmth spreading through him like a quiet reassurance. "What made you become the keeper?" Victor asked. Elias smiled, eyes distant. "My father was the keeper before me. He taught me that the light isn't just for the ships. It's for the souls of those who look to it. When I was a boy, I would sit here through long nights, listening to the foghorn and feeling the sea's breath. It's a part of me." Victor let the words settle. He thought about his own life, full of deadlines, endless noise, and the constant rush to stay ahead. Maybe, he realized, he had been sailing through his own storm all along. The lighthouse clock chimed midnight, its deep, sonorous tone filling the quiet room. Outside, the foghorn echoed the same steady rhythm. Elias stood and moved to the lens, giving it one last careful polish. The amber light shimmered, casting a soft glow that seemed to pulse in time with the heartbeat of the sea. Victor rose from his chair, feeling a new sense of calm settling in his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing me something I didn't know I needed." Elias nodded, a gentle smile touching his lips. "You're always welcome here. The harbor light keeps watch for all who lose their way." Victor stepped outside onto the pier, the fog wrapping around him like a soft blanket. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to rush. The storm inside him had quieted, and the amber waves of the lighthouse were guiding him home. The dawn began to break slowly over the harbor, spilling soft pink and gold light across the calm waters. The fog had lifted, revealing the boats bobbing gently in the morning breeze and the old lighthouse standing tall against the awakening sky. Victor stayed on the pier, watching as the first rays of sunlight touched the amber lens of the lighthouse. It caught the light and seemed to glow even brighter, as if holding the warmth of the sun within itself. He breathed deeply, tasting the salty air, feeling something inside him shift. Elias joined him silently, handing over a worn leather-bound notebook. "Take this," he said. "It's the journal of keepers before me. Maybe it will help you find your own kind of calm." Victor looked down at the book, the leather soft and familiar. He felt a strange connection to the stories within, stories of storms, of solitude, and of light. "I think I will," Victor said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Days passed, and Victor found himself returning to the lighthouse more often. He would arrive in the early morning, sitting quietly with Elias as the amber light danced across the waves. The yacht was moored safely now, but he had no hurry to leave. The busy world he had left behind still waited for him. But here, in this quiet place, the noise seemed distant and unimportant. One afternoon, as Elias polished the brass fittings of the lens, Victor asked, "How do you keep the light burning, night after night, when no one else seems to care?" Elias paused, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Because someone has to. Because the light isn't just a tool, it's a promise. That even when the world feels dark and chaotic, there's something steady to hold on to." Victor nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. That evening, a fierce storm rolled in from the sea, dark clouds racing across the sky and rain pounding against the windows of the lighthouse. The amber light blazed through the storm, its soft waves reaching out over the wild waters. Elias and Victor stood side by side in the lantern room, listening to the foghorn's deep call and the roar of the waves crashing below. Victor felt the storm rage outside, but inside the lighthouse, a deep peace settled over him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for showing me that calm is stronger than any storm." Elias smiled, eyes shining in the amber light. "The harbor light keeps watch, always." The storm raged late into the night, thunder rolling over the waves like ancient drums. Inside the lighthouse, the amber light flickered steady, a warm glow against the cold fury outside. Elias checked the mechanism, his hands steady despite the howling wind shaking the stone walls. Victor watched the light dance, feeling an unfamiliar stillness inside himself. The world he'd been running from felt distant and small compared to the vastness of the sea and the strength of this quiet beacon. Why do you stay here, in a place so isolated? Victor asked, voice low over the storm's roar. Elias paused, looking out into the tempest. Because sometimes, being alone is the only way to hear what your heart is really saying. The sea teaches you patience, resilience, and the beauty of stillness. Victor nodded, the words sinking in. He had spent so long chasing success, ignoring the quiet calls inside him. Morning came slowly, and the storm finally began to fade. The harbor was transformed, washed clean, sparkling under a pale blue sky. Victor stepped outside, breathing in the fresh, salty air. The yacht rocked gently at the dock, its lines taut and secure. He turned to Elias, feeling a new sense of purpose rising inside him. I want to learn from you. Not just how to keep a light burning, but how to find peace in the chaos. Elias smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then you're already a keeper of the light, in your own way. Together, they stood at the edge of the harbor, watching the amber waves ripple softly across the water, a promise of calm in a restless world. In the days that followed, Victor began to slow down in ways he hadn't allowed himself in years. The rush of his old life, the meetings, the endless emails, the constant noise, felt distant and hollow compared to the simple rhythms of the lighthouse and the sea. He spent mornings learning the delicate work of maintaining the lens with Elias. Together, they polished the brass, wound the ancient gears, and listened to the foghorn's deep call echoing across the harbor. The steady sound became a kind of meditation, a reminder that some things endure no matter the storms. One afternoon, Victor found himself standing on the pier, watching a group of fishermen casting their nets with practiced ease. The harbor was alive with quiet purpose, a world far removed from his high-rise office and boardroom battles. Do you miss the city? Elias asked one evening as they sat by the lighthouse window, the amber light glowing softly around them. Victor thought for a moment, swirling the tea in his hands. Sometimes, but I think I was chasing the wrong things there. Here, I feel like I'm finally catching up to myself. Elias nodded approvingly. The sea has a way of teaching us what matters. It strips away distractions and shows you what's real. They sat in comfortable silence, the amber waves pulsing gently through the room. Outside, the distant bell buoys rang their slow, steady song. Victor's phone buzzed again, but this time, he let it ring without reaching for it. Instead, he opened the leather journal Elias had given him and began to write. His own story, his own thoughts, mingling with the tales of keepers past. For the first time in years, Victor wasn't running. He was still, present, connected, and the harbor light kept shining, a steady beacon in a world that too often forgot the power of calm. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of the lighthouse settled deep into Victor's bones. Each day began with the amber light's gentle glow, and each night ended with the foghorn's low, comforting call. The harbor was no longer just a place he visited. It had become a sanctuary. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and rose, Victor stood beside Elias at the top of the lighthouse. The amber light pulsed softly, sending calm waves across the darkening harbor. Tell me about your father, Victor asked, breaking the quiet. Elias's gaze softened. He was a man of few words, but his heart was as vast as the sea. He taught me that a lighthouse isn't just about light, it's about hope. Even when the storms rage, the light reminds us that dawn will come. Victor nodded, feeling the weight of those words. I want to be that kind of light, for myself and maybe for others too. Elias smiled warmly. You already are. That night, as the harbor settled into a peaceful silence, Victor wrote by the soft glow of the lantern room. The words flowed easily, stories of storms weathered, lessons learned, and the calm found in unexpected places. Outside, the foghorn sounded a steady, deep note, echoing across the water like a heartbeat. Victor looked up, feeling a quiet joy he hadn't known in years. The harbor light was no longer just a beacon for sailors. It was a beacon for his own soul. Morning light crept through the narrow windows of the lighthouse, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floors. Elias and Victor sat side by side, sharing a quiet breakfast of strong coffee and fresh bread. Outside, seagulls cried softly, and the harbor stirred to life with the sounds of fishermen preparing their boats. Victor watched the water shimmer in the early light and felt a calm settle deep within him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the weight of deadlines or the pressure of constant noise. Here, time moved differently, slower, gentler, more meaningful. Elias noticed the change too. You've come a long way since you first drifted into the harbor. Victor chuckled softly. I think the harbor saved me. As the day unfolded, Victor helped Elias with the routine tasks, checking the lantern, cleaning the lenses, and winding the clockwork that kept the amber light turning. Each movement was deliberate and careful, a dance of patience and care. Victor found himself savoring the simplicity, the focus, the quiet connection to something greater than himself. Later, they sat on the pier watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery orange and purple. Elias broke the silence. The sea is always changing, but the light remains constant. It's a reminder that no matter what storms come, there's always hope. Victor smiled, feeling that hope grow inside him like a steady flame. That night, as the amber light swept across the harbor, Victor finally understood what it meant to be a keeper, not just of a lighthouse, but of peace, resilience, and quiet strength. And as the foghorn sounded its deep, steady call, he whispered to himself, I'm home. Days melted into weeks, and Victor's visits to the lighthouse became part of his daily rhythm. The yacht, once a symbol of his hurried life, now rested quietly at the dock, a silent witness to his transformation. One crisp morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, Elias invited Victor to join him on the lighthouse balcony. The cool sea breeze tugged at their coats, carrying the scent of salt and pine. Elias pointed to the horizon where the sea met the sky in a soft, endless line. Every day is a chance to start anew, he said. The light teaches us that even after the darkest night, dawn always comes. Victor nodded thoughtfully. It's funny how something so simple, a light, a rhythm, can change everything. Elias smiled. Simplicity is often the hardest thing to find in a complicated world. Later that day, Victor took out his journal and began writing a letter, one he had avoided for years. It was to the people he'd left behind, explaining his absence and the lessons he'd learned. He wanted to share the calm he had found, hoping it might reach others lost in their own storms. As the amber light glowed softly behind him, Victor felt a profound sense of peace. The lighthouse had become more than a place. It was a guide, a refuge, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in stillness. That evening, the foghorn's deep call echoed across the harbor, wrapping the lighthouse in its timeless song. Victor looked up at the amber waves rippling through the night and whispered, "Thank you for the light and for the calm." Elias stood beside him, eyes shining with quiet pride. The harbor light never goes out. Neither will your journey. Winter crept slowly into the harbor, bringing with it chilly winds and frosty mornings. The lighthouse, dusted with a fine layer of ice, stood resolute against the biting cold. Elias and Victor worked side by side, their breaths visible in the crisp air as they tended to the light. Victor had learned to move with patience, his once restless energy now tempered by the rhythms of the sea and the steady pulse of the amber glow. One evening, as snowflakes began to fall softly around them, Victor asked, "Do you ever feel lonely up here, away from everything?" Elias looked out across the frozen harbor, the light casting a warm circle in the darkness. Loneliness comes and goes, but it's in those quiet moments that we find ourselves. The light keeps me company, and sometimes, so do the memories of those who came before. Victor nodded, feeling the truth in those words. As the winter nights deepened, Victor began to share stories from his past with Elias, tales of high-stakes deals, endless meetings, and the heavy weight of expectations. Elias listened without judgment, his calm presence a balm to Victor's restless soul. "You're carrying a lot," Elias said gently, "but the harbor light reminds us to let go, to trust that calm will come if we're patient." Victor smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. The amber light's soft waves seemed to reach into his heart, washing away the stress and fear. One snowy morning, Victor stood at the lighthouse window, watching the harbor sparkle under a blanket of white. He felt a quiet gratitude for the light, for Elias, and for the unexpected journey that had brought him here. The foghorn sounded its deep, steady call, a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest times, there was always a light to guide the way. Victor whispered, "I'm ready for whatever comes next, Spring slowly unfurled across the harbor, thawing the ice and bringing new life to the shore. Flowers peeked through the damp earth, and the scent of salt mixed with fresh blossoms filled the air. Victor felt the renewal in his own heart. The stillness he'd found over the winter had grown into a quiet strength, a steady flame that warmed even the coldest days. One afternoon, as they repaired a weather-beaten bench near the lighthouse, Elias shared a story from his youth. "When I was a boy, I used to think the lighthouse was magic," Elias said, his eyes bright with memory. "But it's not the light itself that's magic. It's the hope it carries." Victor smiled, hammering a loose nail into the wood. Hope is powerful. That evening, the amber light spilled softly over the harbor, painting the water with golden waves. The foghorn's deep call rolled over the gentle breeze, a steady heartbeat echoing through the night. Victor stood at the lantern room window, looking out at the calm sea. For the first time, he felt truly at peace. Elias joined him quietly. "You've come far, Victor. The light shines brighter with you here." Victor nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "I'm ready to carry it forward." As spring turned to summer, Victor's connection to the lighthouse deepened. He began to understand that the true power of the harbor light wasn't just in the amber glow or the steady foghorn, but in the calm and hope it offered to every soul lost in the storm. And as the harbor settled into a peaceful rhythm, Victor knew he had found not just a light, but a home. Summer brought long days of sun and warm sea breezes that carried the laughter of children playing near the docks. The harbor buzzed gently with life, boats coming and going, fishermen mending nets, and the steady amber light watching over them all. Victor stood on the lighthouse balcony, the wind tousling his hair as he gazed out across the sparkling water. He thought about how much he had changed since that first night in the fog, the panic and confusion replaced by quiet confidence and peace. Elias joined him, carrying a small wooden box. He set it down carefully. "This was my father's," he said softly. "It holds tools and memories of the keepers before us." Victor opened the box to find an assortment of old instruments, worn maps, and a small, faded photograph of a young man standing beside the lighthouse, eyes full of hope. Elias's voice was gentle as he spoke. "The light is more than just a guide for sailors. It's a connection between generations, a symbol of resilience and care." Victor nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on his shoulders. "I want to honor that." They stood together in the fading light, the amber waves casting a golden glow over the harbor. The foghorn's deep sound rolled out once more, a timeless song that echoed through the night. That summer night, as the stars glittered overhead, Victor made a promise to himself, to keep the light burning, to carry the calm forward, and to be a beacon for those who, like him, might one day lose their way. The harbor light keeper was no longer just Elias. It was now a legacy shared between two souls bound by the sea, the light, and the quiet strength of hope. The days grew shorter, and autumn painted the harbor in rich shades of amber and gold, matching the lighthouse's glow. Leaves drifted softly onto the wooden pier, and a crispness settled into the air that hinted at coming cold. Victor and Elias worked side by side, preparing the lighthouse for the quieter months ahead. They checked every gear, oiled every hinge, and wrapped the lantern room windows with care. One afternoon, Victor paused, watching a small boat struggle against the rising wind as it tried to enter the harbor. "Would the light help them?" he asked, a flicker of doubt in his voice. Elias smiled gently. "The light always helps, not just by showing the way, but by reminding sailors, and all of us, that we are never truly alone." Victor felt that truth settle into him like a warm embrace. That evening, they stood atop the lighthouse, the amber waves casting long shadows across the restless sea. The foghorn's deep call cut through the chill, steady and sure. Victor looked out over the harbor, feeling a sense of belonging he'd never known before. "Thank you, Elias," he said quietly, "for showing me how to find peace." Elias placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "The peace was always inside you. The harbor light just helped you see it." As autumn deepened, the lighthouse stood tall against the gathering storms, its amber light a steady promise in a changing world. Victor knew his journey was far from over, but for the first time, he was ready to face whatever came next, with calm, courage, and the light guiding him home. Winter whispered its approach as frost crept over the harbor, and the first snowflakes began to fall. The lighthouse stood firm, a glowing beacon against the cold, gray skies. Inside, Elias and Victor prepared for the harsh months ahead, knowing the light was needed now more than ever. Victor wrapped his scarf tightly as he helped Elias tend the lantern. The amber glow filled the room, chasing away the chill. "Sometimes," Elias said softly, "the darkest storms bring the brightest lights." Victor nodded, feeling the truth in the words. That night, as the wind howled outside and waves battered the rocky shore, Victor sat by the window, watching the amber light ripple over the frozen harbor. His thoughts drifted to the life he had left behind, the chaos, the noise, the endless rush. Here, in this quiet place, he had found something different. A steady rhythm, a calm that soothed his soul. He reached for the leather-bound journal, pen in hand, and began to write, not just his story, but the story of the harbor light and the peace it carried. Outside, the foghorn sounded its deep, mournful call, a reminder that no matter how fierce the storm, the light remained. Victor smiled to himself, knowing he was part of that light now. And as the amber waves pulsed softly through the night, he whispered, "I'm home." The first morning of winter dawned quiet and cold. Frost sparkled on the wooden pier like scattered diamonds, and the harbor water mirrored the pale sky. Inside the lighthouse, Elias and Victor prepared for the day's routine with steady hands and calm hearts. Victor found himself more at peace than he'd been in years. The light's amber glow, soft and steady, wrapped around him like a warm embrace. As Elias wound the clockwork mechanism, the old brass gears sang their familiar song, a gentle hum that filled the tower with life. Outside, the wind whispered through the bare branches of the trees lining the shore. The foghorn's deep bellow rolled across the water, steady and sure. Victor stood by the window, watching as the amber light spread across the dark harbor, reaching into the quiet night. He thought about the stormy days he'd left behind and the calm he'd found here. It wasn't just the light that had changed him. It was the slow, steady work of being present, of finding peace in the stillness. Elias joined him, his weathered face soft in the glow. "You're becoming a true keeper, Victor. The light shines brighter with you." Victor smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle into his soul. Together, they watched as the harbor light held its silent vigil, a promise that no matter the darkness, calm could always be found. The winter nights stretched long and deep, blanketing the harbor in silence. Inside the lighthouse, the amber light glowed like a steady heartbeat, a soft pulse in the stillness. Victor found comfort in the quiet routine, the careful polishing of brass, the winding of gears, the sound of the foghorn echoing through the night. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Victor shared a memory from his past. "I used to think success meant never stopping, never resting. But now, I see it's about finding moments like this, moments of stillness." Elias nodded, eyes gentle. "The sea teaches us that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is to simply be still." Victor listened as the wind sang against the windows, the amber light casting warm shadows on the walls. He felt a deep gratitude for the lighthouse, for Elias, and for the unexpected journey that had brought him here. The foghorn sounded its slow, steady call, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light and calm endure. Victor whispered softly, "Thank you for showing me the way." Spring whispered back to the harbor, coaxing the earth to wake beneath a blanket of fresh green shoots. The lighthouse stood tall, its amber light shining steadily as the days grew warmer and the air filled with the scent of blossoming flowers. Victor found himself walking along the pier more often, breathing in the sweet mingling of salt and new life. The light and the sea had become a part of him, a quiet strength that carried through every step. One morning, as Elias and Victor repaired a weathered railing, Elias spoke softly. "This place has a way of healing. The sea, the light, they remind us to keep moving forward, even when the path seems uncertain." Victor nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle deep in his chest. That evening, the amber glow swept gently across the harbor, painting the water with soft waves of gold. The foghorn's deep song rolled out across the calm sea, steady and sure. Victor stood beside Elias, watching the horizon where the sky met the water in a perfect line. He realized then that he wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was part of the harbor's story, a keeper of its light and calm. The harbor hummed with quiet life as summer approached once more. The days stretched long, and the sun bathed the water in sparkling light. Boats drifted lazily along the gentle waves, and seagulls wheeled overhead, their calls echoing in the warm air. Victor stood at the base of the lighthouse, watching a group of children chasing each other along the pier. Their laughter was light and carefree, a sharp contrast to the heavy burdens he had carried before. Elias approached, carrying a worn box filled with old lanterns and tools. "These," he said, setting the box down, "were used by keepers long before us. Each one carries a story." Victor opened the box carefully, fingers tracing the weathered metal of a small lantern. "It feels like more than just objects. It's history, connection." Elias smiled. "Exactly. The light connects us, not just to the sea, but to each other across time and space." That evening, as the amber light poured over the harbor, Victor sat by the window writing in his journal. The words came easily, filled with the hope and calm he had discovered here. The foghorn sounded its slow, steady call, a timeless song that seemed to wrap the whole world in comfort. Victor closed his journal and whispered, "I'm ready to keep this light burning, always." The autumn winds began to carry a sharper chill, rustling the golden leaves that lined the harbor. The lighthouse, steady and strong, stood like a guardian against the changing season. Victor and Elias worked side by side, tending to the lantern room and checking the mechanisms that kept the amber light turning through longer, darker nights. Victor paused, gazing out at the horizon where the sea met the sky in a soft haze. "Sometimes I think the lighthouse teaches more than just sailors," he said quietly. "It teaches us how to stay steady, even when everything else changes." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "It's true. The light is a reminder that calm is possible, even in the middle of a storm." That night, as the foghorn sang its deep, steady song, Victor and Elias shared stories of past storms, both those that roared over the harbor and those that raged within their own hearts. The amber light washed over them, a gentle embrace that made the night feel less lonely. Victor looked up at the glowing lens and whispered, "I'm grateful for this light, and for the peace it brings." Elias smiled, placing a hand on Victor's shoulder. "The light is always here, and so are we." Winter's first snowflakes drifted softly onto the harbor, covering the wooden pier in a quiet white blanket. The lighthouse stood tall, its amber glow warm and inviting against the cold gray sky. Victor wrapped his scarf tight as he climbed the spiral staircase with Elias. The steady hum of the lantern's gears filled the air, a comforting sound amidst the biting wind. "Every year," Elias said, "the sea reminds us that nothing stays the same. But the light, our light, remains constant." Victor nodded, feeling the truth of the words deep in his bones. Later that evening, as snowflakes swirled outside the lantern room, Victor sat with Elias, sharing a cup of tea and stories from their pasts. For the first time, Victor spoke openly about the fears and doubts that had once consumed him. Elias listened quietly, his calm presence a steady anchor. "The light teaches us resilience," Elias said softly. "It's not about never falling, but about rising again, stronger." Victor smiled, feeling the warmth of the amber light wrap around him like a shield against the cold. Outside, the foghorn sounded its deep, steady call, a timeless reminder that no matter the storm, the light endures. Victor whispered, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." And the harbor light shone on, a beacon of calm in the restless world. Spring crept back into the harbor, softening the harsh edges of winter with gentle rains and budding blooms. The lighthouse, steadfast through the seasons, stood like a quiet guardian over the changing tides. Victor and Elias worked together to clear the paths leading to the lighthouse, their breath visible in the cool morning air. "Every season has its storms and its calms," Elias said, pausing to look out over the water. "And every storm reminds us how important it is to have a light to guide us." Victor smiled, feeling a deep sense of purpose settling in his chest. "I want to be that light for myself and others." Elias nodded, a warm smile touching his weathered face. "You already are." That evening, the amber glow spilled softly across the harbor, painting waves of calm on the restless sea. The foghorn's low bellow echoed across the quiet night. Victor sat by the lantern room window, writing in his journal. Each word was a step toward healing, a promise to keep the light burning, no matter what storms came. The harbor settled into peaceful silence, and Victor whispered, "I'm home." Summer days warmed the harbor once more, filling the air with the scent of salt and blooming wildflowers. The lighthouse stood tall, its amber light a steady glow beneath the endless blue sky. Victor found himself waking with the sun, the rhythms of the sea guiding his steps. The calm he'd found here was no longer a fragile hope. It was a steady force within him. One afternoon, as they worked to repair a weathered boat dock, Victor paused and looked out across the water. "Do you ever think about what happens when the lighthouse is no longer needed?" he asked Elias quietly. Elias smiled thoughtfully. "The sea always finds new ways to challenge us. But the light will always be a symbol, a reminder that calm can be found, even in the darkest times." Victor nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle deep inside. That evening, the amber light rippled softly across the harbor, casting golden waves on the water. The foghorn's deep call rolled out across the quiet sea. Victor closed his journal and whispered, "Thank you for the light." Elias stood beside him, eyes bright with pride. "You carry it now." The crisp breeze of autumn swept through the harbor, rustling the golden leaves that danced along the wooden pier. The lighthouse stood as a steadfast sentinel, its amber glow cutting softly through the early evening mist. Victor and Elias worked together in the lantern room, polishing the brass fittings and tightening loose screws on the aging machinery. The familiar rhythm of their tasks brought comfort, a steady heartbeat amid the changing season. Victor looked out at the harbor, where boats rocked gently in the fading light. "Sometimes, I wonder if the light is more for the keepers than the sailors," he said with a small smile. Elias chuckled softly. "Maybe it's for both. It's a reminder, to us and to them, that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a light to guide the way." As night fell, the foghorn sounded its deep, mournful call, echoing across the calm sea. The amber light swept slowly over the water, a warm beacon in the cool darkness. Victor stood beside Elias, feeling the weight of the moment, the connection between past and present, between the sea and the sky, between the light and the souls it touched. He whispered, "I'm ready to carry this light forward, for as long as I'm needed." Elias placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "And you will be, my friend." The harbor light never fades. The first frost of winter kissed the harbor with shimmering crystals, coating the pier and lighthouse steps in a delicate lace. The air was sharp and clean, carrying the distant cry of seabirds and the low hum of the sea. Victor adjusted his scarf, the warmth of the amber light inside the lantern room seeping into his bones. He and Elias moved with practiced ease, tending to the ancient gears and polishing the brass that held the light's magic. "Each winter feels colder than the last," Victor remarked, "but the light always stays the same." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "The light is a promise. No matter how fierce the storm, it will shine." That evening, the foghorn's deep, rolling call echoed through the crisp air, a steady pulse against the silence. Victor stood by the window, watching the amber waves ripple across the dark water. He thought about how far he had come, from a lost man drifting through his own storms to a keeper of light and calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the leather-bound journal, opening to a fresh page. With a steady hand, he began to write, his words flowing like the gentle tide. Outside, the lighthouse stood tall and bright, its amber light a beacon of hope for all who needed it. Victor whispered softly, "I am home." The harbor was quiet that morning, the water smooth and glassy under a pale winter sun. Frost glistened on the dock, sparkling like tiny stars in the soft light. Inside the lighthouse, the amber glow pulsed steadily, casting warmth across the worn wooden floors. Victor stood at the lantern room window, tracing the horizon with his eyes. The sea stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of possibility and calm. Elias entered, carrying a steaming mug of tea. "The light feels stronger these days," he said quietly. "Maybe it's because of who's tending it." Victor smiled, accepting the cup. "I feel stronger too." They sat in companionable silence, watching as the amber light swept slowly over the harbor. The foghorn sounded its deep call, a timeless rhythm that seemed to sync with their steady breathing. Victor reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the leather journal. He flipped to a blank page, then began to write with a calm focus. Outside, the lighthouse kept its silent watch, a steadfast guardian of the harbor and all the souls it sheltered. Victor's journey was far from over, but now he carried the light within him, a steady beacon against the storms of life. He whispered, "The light is mine to keep." Spring began to stir the harbor awake, coaxing new life from the earth and sea alike. Soft green shoots pushed through the soil, and the air filled with the sweet scent of blossoming flowers. The lighthouse stood tall and proud, its amber light glowing warmly against the fresh dawn. Victor walked along the pier, the cool breeze ruffling his hair. He felt a deep sense of belonging, as if the harbor had wrapped him in its embrace and never let go. Elias joined him, carrying a weathered book. "This," he said, handing it over, "is a collection of letters from keepers long past. Stories of storms, hope, and the light that guides us through." Victor took the book carefully, feeling the weight of history in his hands. "It's a reminder," he said softly, "that I'm part of something much bigger than myself." That evening, as the amber glow swept across the harbor, Victor sat in the lantern room, reading the letters by the warm light. The foghorn's deep call echoed through the night, a steady song of resilience and hope. Victor closed the book, feeling a quiet strength settle in his heart. He whispered, "I will keep the light burning, for them, for me, for all who need it." Summer brought warmth and light to the harbor, filling the air with the hum of life and the scent of salt and sun-warmed wood. The lighthouse stood as a steady guardian, its amber glow a soft pulse beneath the wide, blue sky. Victor rose early, the rhythms of the sea now part of his very being. He helped Elias maintain the light, polishing the brass and tending the ancient gears with care. One afternoon, as they sat on the pier watching the sun dip toward the horizon, Victor spoke quietly. "I used to think the light was only for sailors, but now I see. It's for anyone who needs a guide through darkness." Elias smiled, eyes reflecting the amber glow. "And you, Victor, have become that guide." That night, the foghorn's deep, rolling call echoed across the harbor. The amber light swept slowly over the water, a gentle wave of calm in the restless world. Victor stood by the lantern room window, feeling a profound peace settle within him. He whispered, "I am ready for whatever comes next." The days grew shorter as autumn settled once again over the harbor, painting the world in shades of amber and gold that mirrored the lighthouse's glow. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. Victor and Elias worked side by side, preparing the lighthouse for the coming winter. They tightened every screw, cleaned every surface, and ensured the amber light would burn bright through the longest nights. Victor paused by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, its fading light blending with the amber waves from the lantern. "Do you think the light will ever be truly obsolete?" Victor asked softly. Elias turned, eyes steady and kind. "The light is never obsolete. It's more than technology. It's hope, guidance, and peace. That will always be needed." That evening, the foghorn sounded its deep, slow call, a steady rhythm against the quiet sea. Victor stood in the lantern room, feeling the warmth of the amber light wash over him. The calm he had sought for so long was no longer something distant. It was part of him now. He whispered to the night, "I will keep the light burning, always." The first snowflakes of winter drifted gently over the harbor, softening the edges of the world in a quiet white embrace. The lighthouse stood tall and bright, its amber light pulsing steadily through the cold night. Victor stood beside Elias in the lantern room, watching as the light spread across the dark water. The foghorn's deep, mournful call echoed through the silence, a timeless song of hope and endurance. "Do you ever regret leaving your old life behind?" Elias asked quietly. Victor shook his head slowly. "No. This light, this place, it's where I was meant to be. I found something I never knew I was searching for." Elias smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "Then you are truly a keeper of the light." Outside, the harbor settled into peaceful stillness, wrapped in the amber glow of the lighthouse. Victor took a deep breath, feeling the calm settle deep within him. And as the foghorn sounded once more, steady and sure, he whispered, "I am home."